YouTube comments have become like my messages for me. Anybody who knows me personally knows that there are times when I literally just spend days doing something else and then I return to respond to a thing all of a sudden. I've been like this for a while, particularly after I got really enveloped in learning Spanish like about a year ago now. But it's been like this with all sorts of things, um, even further back. I think ultimately because I am a pretty introverted person, and I'm a person who's very focused on hobbies and passions, that it becomes difficult to respond to people. But I always remember too, this is the thing, I'm very punctual and obsessed with following rules as well. And so if I feel like I'm breaking some code or whatever, or if I just like the person, I always get back to it. But the thing is, I with my YouTube comments, I didn't used to work like this. Like I used to just respond to all of them pretty much as soon as I got them. But now I seem to respond to them like several days after the video is out in many cases, which is interesting for me. I don't know, I've had this tendency to respond to every comment on the videos, and um there have been periods of time when I did that less, but in general that's been like the tendency on my channel, right? Because I like to encourage the interaction on the videos, and to pick people's brains and to get their thoughts on the things that I'm saying, and to hear about their own experiences. But nowadays I don't seem to do it as much because I'm just so locked in on my own stuff that it becomes difficult to find the time. But I still do find the time to make these videos, even if it's not as much as it once was. Um, Ultimately, I think the passions that we have are the most important things that we have in this life. When I look back at any time in my life, I I look at it with fondness if and only if I was spending a lot of time on the things that I love. And I find it existentially terrifying, the idea that there can be people that exist who don't know what they love, because it was very apparent to me what I loved and why from an early age, and I continued developing more things that I happen to love. I found out about different things that I loved, or I chose to love different things by cultivating an interest. And I find it existentially terrifying that there are people who who don't even know, right? Or they just don't have any passions. At that point, I hesitate to say this because I don't want to jump to conclusions. I want to be fair, but are you even human? I don't know. Maybe you are, but like my conception of what a human is just so radically different based on my own experience. So I find it difficult to fully grasp the idea of being that kind of person. And at the end of the day, um, the joy that my hobbies are able to bring me, that feeling that everything is right in the world, or that um, it's good to be here, because we have these beautiful things, anime and video games and literature and history and languages and all these different things. Aesthetics in many cases. I mean, sometimes I just scroll through images of people's rooms, with the CRTs and the manga and their game sets and everything, and I think this is just beautiful. Especially, the Japanese, they know how to do it. They know how to have nice looking rooms with good organized setups, everything placed in the best possible way. I geek out over that, I really do. Shelf posting as well, people's shelf posting in the literature community. Um, and, you know, as I said years ago now, 5 years ago, that's crazy to think about. I am an autistically obsessed, aspiring expert. Did a whole video about this when I was 18, where I said, you know, I basically just listed out every hobby and that I had. Not even all of them, like a bunch of them. One of those hobbies I said in that video, now I don't even have anymore. But I listed out all these hobbies, and I was just like, isn't it so awesome to be alive? And I still feel like that. You know, it's strange. I've been doing this channel so long, which I would say is one of my other passions or hobbies, although I will say I'm not as crazy about it as I once was in the past. Um, it's one of those other ones that has definitely stood the test of time, and it's it's interesting the impact that it's had on me, because through all these years I have basically used this channel to remember things. Even when I don't review my own videos or go back to like try to find a specific memory or something, I just remember when I filmed them. You know, kind of like remembering a specific spot in a diary, like, oh yeah, even though I don't go back to review it, I remember writing this and I remember what I said. Um, and so I have this like weirdly self-referential thing that I do when I'm thinking about a specific time, where I'm like, oh yeah, I made that video and then I said this and this. And nowadays I find myself doing that even in these videos. I find myself doing it a lot more. And I think in a way, it's almost like a way for me to show my receipts when I'm talking about a specific time, so people don't think that I'm just blowing hot air or coming up with things. Where it's like, oh yeah, there actually has been continuity in this whole thing. I don't know. I would like to think that it's cool, at least for some people, to be able to go back and look and be like, oh wow, what's going on here? This shit has been going for so long, but it's one of the joys of being a NEET, right? It's one of the joys of being somebody that actually has the freedom to engage in their hobbies and to do the things that they love that really mean something to them. Um, if I didn't have this freedom, I I don't know. I don't know what I would be like. I would probably be very miserable, because at the times when I had a job, I was very miserable, and I was pretty close to ending it all. I mean, you guys remember the Wyoming arc? I those of you that were there at least remember the Wyoming arc. I was talking about suicide all the time. Well, not a great time. Really just not a great time. And it's been years at this point since then. It's crazy to think about, but it's literally been years. And I haven't thought about that stuff ever since. Because I haven't had the same life, you know? I had some other jobs since then, but I always quit them after it got too bad, you know? Just to take care of myself. Or because I literally had a psychotic break by the end and I didn't have the option to keep going, which also happened a couple times due to lack of sleep. At least that's my assumption. I it may have been lack of sleep in combination with like general stress or something. I don't, it's been explained to me before, but I still can't fully grasp how psychosis works. There's, I think on some level we don't understand it yet. But um I feel eternally blessed to have this freedom. Over time, what I realized is that I can still enjoy this freedom in different contexts, you know, even if I were to lose everything I have right now, I would still be able to live in this free way. But my goal in life is to have a job that I can be passionate about and that I can enjoy, and that I can really feel like I'm contributing to society doing. And ultimately, given my passion for linguistics and language, given my passion for conveying information to others and actually teaching the things that I know, I think that working as a teacher would be that job for me. It would be that passion for me, because there is an environment where I really remember individual teachers making a significant difference for me as somebody who liked doing the work, as somebody who, wanted to do well but had a lot of self-esteem issues and had a lot of problems at home and also with the environment at school. And those teachers that believe in you and that care about their work can make such a huge difference. And I wish I had more of them ultimately, because I dropped out of school. I did not keep going. And there's only, such an influence that teachers can have over the system. But I want to be one that is transformational, that has a transformational impact on the lives of especially troubled youth, because I was a troubled youth, I was somebody that was good at the work, that liked to do the work, but was ultimately so troubled, and that led to me having a bad outcome in the school. I used to think it was just because there was something wrong with me. What I didn't understand at the time is how our environment influences us. For example, I was hungry, and if you're hungry in school and you're focusing on, that feeling of hunger in your stomach the whole time, then how can you possibly focus? If you are being bullied at school and those kids are in your class and you don't feel safe, how can you focus on the material intently if you have that feeling of of unsafety? How are you going to be able to really excel if you haven't had sleep the night before and happen to make up for some of the sleep in class, or even if you've had like most of your sleep, like you've just got that sleepiness lingering over you. These types of things are examples of how our environment, or our situation around us impacts outcomes, right? Although I also think choice is very important here as well, and it's something that I've seen the power of, really, because I remember, and this was one of the other things that inspired me to change my trajectory and to really start working on languages in a very serious way, the way that I am now, is seeing, for example, my mom. I've told this story before, but here's an example of someone who had epilepsy for her whole life and has accrued significant damage to her brain, literally from seizures, that had to be basically reconstructed in a hospital for months and months as a child, who was able to get her bachelor's degree with incredible grades, some of the best grades of the people in her college. And it wasn't a bad college, it was a good college she went to. She was able to do all this in spite of the fact that she literally had carbon monoxide poisoning that was in the air, and she had to go to the hospital twice for the carbon monoxide poisoning that was going on at my dad's house as she was doing the as she was doing her exams. And there was this one moment where one of the times where she had to go to the hospital to get on oxygen and to have all of this undone, she literally told the nurse, no, I can't do this right now. I have an exam and I have a 4.0 GPA and you're going to let me do this. And the nurse was just like, okay, you can go on ahead before we get to doing everything here. And I think about that, her determination and her willingness to say, no, I take responsibility for this. I am responsible for my own destiny and my own life, and I am going to generate the best outcomes for myself in acknowledgement of that fact. I find that to be very powerful. And so it's important to recognize the things that we don't have control over, in order to recognize the things that we do have control over, right? The things that we can change substantially by developing an understanding of them and working through by taking responsibility for them. I find that to be very powerful, and seeing somebody who didn't just live in an environment where there were these clear, objective obstacles, right? Both, physically damaging the brain and also, emotionally, just given how difficult it is to live in a situation like that. She took the decision to say, no, I'm not going to let this affect me. Insofar as my studies are concerned, I'm going to keep going, And this was at the same time that my father was threatening her with wooden planks and, telling her that she would never amount to anything and that she should just give up her degree so she could spend more money on him. And they were already divorced at this point, They were already divorced, but she had to live with him because she didn't have anywhere else to go. So she moved back in with him at this time. And every single day it was more emotional abuse. And this was the same time that, she didn't have her own room, so she had to sit out there in the front room, with those terrible smells from fucking dog shit on the floor, and having, drug addicts come in and out of the house, with like 5, 6, 7 people, coming in and out of the house, so they could continue their neurotic conversations and bad habits in the quote-unquote company of my father. I say quote-unquote because really, you're just living in your own bubbles when you're doing that stuff together. It's not actually social interaction. And she looked at all this and saw it for the, as much as I don't like to use this word, degeneracy that it is, and made her own decision. And, really, I looked at that and I thought, I have no excuse. But on some level, this also exposes the importance of the influences that we have. While I was ultimately able to make my own decisions with respect to languages and pursuing my own goals, which at this point has had phenomenal results as a project, I also think that without that influence being present, without me actually being able to witness it, it's very unlikely that I would have pursued to completion this project. I wouldn't have realized that I really enjoy doing this without at first recognizing that it is possible to become accustomed to the parts that are difficult, to become disciplined and make decisions and things like this. I actually had to have this thing that was outside of my control, which is a positive influence, in order to effectively make that decision. And so even though there were a variety of ways in which I was not privileged, coming from poverty, coming from abuse, having a literal gas leak in my home, and the like, I was also very lucky to have somebody in my corner that was able to inspire me, that was able to show me that something else is possible, and that you can have healthy habits, and you can push for something better for yourself. And without that, my life would have likely been very different. And so it goes to show that there is an extent to which we have control and an extent to which we do not. Ultimately, we're social creatures, and so the influence that those in our environment have is very strong, right? That's why I often like to say, it's kind of a harsh thing to say, but if you are focused on bodybuilding and being in shape, for example, just an example, you got to ditch your fat friends, because ultimately the people that you surround yourself with have an impact on the way that you see yourself and the way that you live your life. Now, I'm not that extreme about it. I have a couple friends that, maybe they're not that productive, maybe they don't spend their time in the wisest of ways, but I'm still, supportive of them, and I try to be a good influence, but, it's not as though I spend like 24/7 with them, and it's not as though I have a bunch of friends like that, I have more friends that are productive in their field, or that have hobbies similar to mine that they're just grinding at and working at in this consistent fashion, and we get to kind of talk about those things, and it's like, if I encounter a person that's not very productive and they're interested in becoming like that, man, it's like something just switches in my head, and I'm there giving them all the resources. Like, I'm there talking through every problem that they have and everything that they want to do, because, hey man, I've been there. I remember what it was like to be like that. I remember what it was like to be someone without a passion project that they're working diligently on, but they still want to. They still want to get to that point and see the results at the end. And so, I mean, it's like people who work out a lot, right? Like, people who work out will be pretty distant or maybe even pretentious about people that don't, and they try not to be close to that whole world. But as soon as they encounter somebody who's interested in starting, it's like a switch just flips, and they're all of a sudden the most supportive and nicest person ever. I'm like that, with people that want to study, with people that are interested in languages. And I became like that. I wasn't born like that, but I became like that because of my own decisions, as well as because of certain things about my environment, about the people that were around me. Well, in particular, one person, a parent, that totally changed my perspective. Because I used to think, okay, I'm too old for this. I've always had this dream of becoming a polyglot, of being at least fluent in one other language, and I'll never be able to do it. That's what I thought, because I thought it was too late for me. I thought that there was something wrong about my brain. But in encountering the success that my mom was able to forge for herself, to build for herself, as well as encountering a couple individuals online that were really not the brightest bulbs in the box. I mean, people that, to quote SpongeBob, made phone operators seem smart. that also happen to be polyglots, it really just made me realize, I can do this too. This is a thing that I can do as well. It's just about being constant, being consistent. And so I realized that, and I assessed the efficacy of different methods once again, which I had remembered, most of the facts about from when I had researched this stuff before, and I just went into it, I just dived in, and I haven't stopped ever since. It's kind of a strange world that we're living in. It's strange the way that things can transpire and the way that things can change in one's life. But I feel very thankful for the direction things have gone in my life at this point. You know, um, I had one friend, one that I respect very much, who's very very clearly intelligent aside from his literal credentials in the real world. Tell me that I sounded like a professor when I talk about um, about linguistics and about the history of languages, which I was very flattered by. Um, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but to hear that from somebody who's close to literally becoming a professor themselves, um, it felt very 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 flattering to hear. And again, I don't know if I sound like that or not, but to hear that sort of made me recognize just how passionate about this stuff I am, and it helps me put into context the fact that the reason I do this stuff is because on some level it's life affirming for me. It feels good to do. That without it I wouldn't be the same person. I just wouldn't feel the same without it. And and when I think about the fact that if just a few things were different in my life, I wouldn't have this hobby. I wouldn't be doing this stuff every day. That's crazy to think about, right? You know, I simply would not have made the same decisions without the influence of my mom and without the influence of those arguably very low IQ people online that I once found very annoying, even though, they were highly successful in this respect, polyglots. Um, if I hadn't had the inspiration from those people, I just, I wouldn't be at this point. Um, I don't know. It's crazy to think about where life can take you and how things can go. Some people believe in the butterfly effect. I don't know about all that. It's kind of we're getting really, you know matrixy and all that stuff. I mean, I don't mean in the sense of the movie, but just like fans of the movie, the kind of stuff that they're into. I don't know, but um, it is a bizarre world, to say the least. It is a bizarre world that we're living in, um, but it's one that I find myself thankful to be in at this point. I thought the video was going to end there, but I had another idea after I clicked pause on the recording, which is to say that essentially what I was building to with all of this is that in addition to the fact that there are things that are in our control and that there are things that aren't, that influence us outside of our control, um, I think what my experience indicates to me is that there is this thing, this other layer of reality that's hidden from all of us, right? The person that we could potentially be, or the person that everybody could potentially be if they were in the right circumstances, if the right things happened the right way, if just the stars aligned in the manner that they ought to. There are so many things that people could be, potentially, that they could be interested in, that they could be doing, that they could be achieving. And ultimately, what I wish for, what I really desire for with all my heart and soul, is a society where every single person has equality of opportunity, has the basics in life taken care of. They're just off the table, so that they have a social safety net where they have the freedom to make mistakes, to fall off the wagon from time to time, to get a second, third, or fourth chance, and then keep going, where everybody has access to adequate, nutritious food that allows for their brain to develop properly, where everyone has access to, a calm environment free of violence and abuse, so that they can develop peacefully and discover themselves without interference of from the negativity and demotivating aspects of humanity, of others, where people have the freedom to become educated and to develop a deeper knowledge of the world themselves and various subjects, so that they can begin to understand what they want to do in life, so that they can formulate a sense of themselves and what they really want. There are so many things that allow us to actualize and to make more informed decisions that are simply outside of our control. And ultimately, if we could develop a model, a society where nobody has to be deprived of those things that ultimately deprive them of their freedom, then maybe more people could find the things that they're passionate about, and that really make their world go round, that really make them sit down and say, this is why it's worth living. This is why I want to be here. This is what makes me feel affirmed in life. I think there are things like that exist for a great many people, but they simply don't know what they are, or they don't have access to that feeling because they have been disadvantaged by the world, by their circumstances, or simply because the only thing that they have time for in this life is finding out how they're going to eat, next. Finding out how they're going to keep a roof over their head still. And if you were only focused on surviving, how could you ever have the hope of having the freedom to be living?